The moon hung low over Ponte Vedra Beach on a humid June night in 1942. The gentle crash of waves masked the silent approach of a shadowy vessel lurking offshore. Beneath the surface, the sleek, menacing shape of a German U-boat prepared to disgorge its cargo. Not torpedoes or mines, but something far more sinister. Inside, 4 men in black wetsuits readied themselves, their faces set with steely determination. The leader, Herbert Haupt, adjusted his gear, his mind racing with thoughts of the mission ahead. Trained in sabotage and deception, Haupt had one job: to bring war to American soil. Under the cover of darkness, the men climbed into a small rubber raft. With only the sound of oars slicing through the surf, they rowed toward the shore, their target glinting faintly in the moonlight. Operation Pastorius was a bold sabotage operation devised by German military intelligence. Conceived in Berlin, the mission aimed to cripple America's war effort by targeting critical infrastructure: factories, railroads, bridges, and power plants. Florida's strategic location, coupled with its sprawling and underdefended coastline, made it an ideal entry point for the German agents. The U-boat's commander watched from afar as Haupt and his team dragged their equipment onto the beach. Explosives, timing devices, and wads of counterfeit cash were buried carefully in the sand dunes. The men changed into civilian clothes, transforming from enemy saboteurs into tourists and businessmen. Their goal was simple: vanish into the American heartland and wreak havoc from within. But what the German spies didn't know was that their carefully laid plan was already beginning to unravel. Although Florida's sprawling coastline was sparsely populated in the 1940s, but it wasn't entirely deserted. Local fishermen often ventured out before dawn, and early risers sometimes walked along the beach. Shortly after sunrise, a fisherman noticed the 4 men on the beach. Though the operatives tried to appear casual, their muddied clothes and heavily German-accented English drew the man's suspicion. "Y'all ain't from round here, are you?" he reportedly asked. One of the men mumbled an excuse about being stranded tourists, but their awkward behavior was enough to prompt the fishermen to quietly report the incident to local authorities later that day. This encounter would be one of many small mistakes that ultimately sealed their fate. The operatives had planned to travel inland toward Jacksonville, where they could blend into the city's bustling population. There, they would board trains heading northward. However, they quickly realized they lacked any immediate means of transportation. With no vehicle waiting for them and no local knowledge of the area, they were forced to walk. Hours of trudging along dirt roads and cutting through a marsh left them exhausted and even more conspicuous. When they finally reached a small roadside diner on the outskirts of Jacksonville, their troubles only deepened. Hungry and thirsty, they ordered food but drew attention among the patrons. One of the German spies nervously overpaid with a large bill, forgetting to wait for his change. Another fumbled through his order, struggling with English and misusing slang and idioms. The waitress, though polite, paid particular attention to their peculiar accents and behavior. While the Florida team struggled to stay invisible, a second team hit the beaches of Long Island, New York. However, despite the many missteps made by the Florida team, it would be the New York spies that set their doom in motion. George Dash, the leader of the Long Island saboteur team, had a secret. He was already disillusioned with the Nazis. The plan, which had seemed thrilling in theory, felt suicidal in practice. As soon as Dash and his team landed on Long Island, he made a bold decision: he would turn himself in. Dash contacted the FBI, offering full details of Operation Pastorius in exchange for leniency. He handed over the names of his fellow operatives, their objectives, and crucially, the exact location of the Florida team. Armed with this intelligence, the FBI wasted no time. Back in Jacksonville, the saboteurs were unaware that a net was closing around them. FBI agents and local law enforcement scoured the city, using Dash's information to pinpoint their targets. It didn't take long before Haupt's team, nervous and inexperienced, made fatal mistakes. Witnesses reported their movements: a stranger asking too many questions, a group of men fumbling through a roadside diner. Their buried equipment on Ponte Vedra Beach, hastily concealed and poorly disguised, was discovered within days. When federal agents finally closed in, there was no dramatic firefight, no daring escape. One by one, the saboteurs were captured. Haupt, defiant to the end, refused to betray his mission. But his silence meant little. The game was up. On July 8, 1942, in a Washington, D.C. courtroom, the German spies stood trial for their part in what the Nazis labeled Operation Pastorius. As an act of war, the spies would not see a civilian courtroom. 4 from New York faced a swift and merciless trial. Instead, a military tribunal convened in secret. The court heard tales of sabotage plots and Nazi training camps. During the trial, 2 of the spies testified, George John Dash and Ernst Berger. Their testimonies were critical to the prosecution's case and significantly influenced the outcomes for themselves and the others. 6 of the saboteurs were handed death sentences and were executed by electric chair in August 1942. The leader of the Florida team, Haupt, was among condemned. Only Dash and Berger were spared due to their cooperation with authorities. They received lengthy prison sentences before being deported to Germany after the war. Following the capture of the German spies, the FBI and Coast Guard intensified patrols, and the public was encouraged to report suspicious activity. What had once seemed impossible, a foreign enemy infiltrating American soil, was now an undeniable reality. Today, the beaches of Ponte Vedra are peaceful once more, but the ghosts of that wartime night linger. For Herbert Haupt and his comrades, their mission failed spectacularly. For America, it was a stark reminder that war, even one fought thousands of miles away, could come crashing onto its shores in the dead of night.